Coming next week on The Dwelling Place. Pastor Al Pittman continues to walk us through the Bible, line by line and verse by verse, to let God show us just how timeless His truth is. That's next week on The Dwelling Place.
Welcome to Stacy on the Right with your host, Stacy Washington.
Love is everlasting, love is only kind, love is.
What we've been doing for the last 25 years has only given us a North Korea that has nuclear weapons. So I think for the American people, that's not working. The president's going to try something. We shouldn't mistake here that the North Koreans are all of a sudden trustworthy, credible negotiating partners. These people have been reneging on promises for decades. But you have to give Donald Trump some credit for his resolve and for trying something new to ratchet down the tensions and relieve this pressure that we might be on the brink of a nuclear war.
Yeah.
Well, the fact is that North Korean leaders have long sought meetings with American presidents for decades, so that's not actually a new ask or a new invitation. He has broken the fever that has existed for some time, I should say, on whether we should or should not directly negotiate. And that is something that many people in the Obama administration thought we should have considered more. So in that sense, he deserves credit. This is far preferable to going to war or taking military action in North Korea by all accounts. I think the big question here is what next? And when they say that they've agreed to denuclearization, that is coming as a message through the South Koreans. We don't actually have any idea what that means. We don't know that that means they're going to give access, that they will sign anything, that it will be verifiable. It will require a very detailed negotiation. So we can give credit for breaking the fever. We can give credit for this being better than military action, but I think we shouldn't get further.
Wow. Welcome to Stacy on the Right. That's the comms director for the Obama administration. Back in the day when she used to work in the White House, she never had anything good to say about Republicans or any of our policy proposals. But here she is admitting that it probably is something that President Obama would have liked to have seen during his tenure, which is the normalization of relations through simply allowing the two world leaders or two nations leaders to meet. It is something that we didn't really discuss yesterday on the show. And welcome to Stacy on the Right here on Urban Family Talk and American Family Radio. 866-963-2037 are the call lines. They're wide open for you. We didn't discuss the kind of underlying reality that exists when you admit that the president of the United States is going to meet with this world leader, and that kind of gives that world leader legitimacy. And so what was being denied to the leader of North Korea, Kim Jong-un, by previous administrations was the ability to say that he'd sat down with the leader of the United States and negotiated. And remember, he can say anything he wants to the people who live in his country because they don't have an open media system. So he could say he sat down with the president and strong-armed him into almost anything, and there wouldn't be any pushback on that, no fact-checking or anything of that nature. Still, I want for us to kind of keep in our minds as we consider the ramifications of a meeting between the president and the leader of North Korea, which is a dictatorship and a communist nation. And in addition to that, all of the attendant next steps that are available. And so in order to do that, sometimes it's really fun to go back in history and find out what did, say, for example, President Donald Trump, what was his original thought process on this? You might say, well, Stacy, what could it have been? I mean, he was a private citizen before. As many in the media like to say, he was a reality show guy. I like to refer to him as what he was for the majority of his time before he was president. He was a businessman. And during that time, he would often go on shows and talk about his own ideas for what the nation should do in relation to foreign policy on, I mean, just you name it. The president is on record as a private citizen as having given his opinion on what we should do about this or that. So is it a surprise? Not at all, that he has done the same thing on the topic of North Korea. Apparently, he really had his ears to the ground around 1999 because he was on Meet the Press and he was talking about previous presidents' refusal to even have a sit down with the president of North Korea, but they would always give concessions. And so I was really feeling kind of fortunate this morning. We did another college visit. I mean, this is our life right now. And on the way there, because we had a little bit of a drive, I was looking, just, trolling online, looking for things to kind of talk about that are relevant to North Korea today. And I was looking for some audio for the show today. And when I stumbled across this piece, I thought to myself, I'm surprised, but I'm kind of not. It is not surprising or shocking that the president has already a fully formed opinion on how we should deal with North Korea way back in 1999. And think about whatever you were doing in 1999. I know I certainly was not mulling over the foreign policy actions of the United States as it pertained to North Korea. I just wasn't. I can tell you exactly what I was doing back then. I'm not going to tell you right now, but maybe I'll tell you after the break or something like that. It's probably not going to come up again. I can promise you that. So I want to listen to this. It's Donald Trump. He's on Meet the Press in one of those one-on-one interviews, and he's talking about North Korea. It's number 4.
Negotiate. I would negotiate like crazy, and I'd make sure that we tried to get the best deal possible. But look, Tim, if a man walks up to you on a street in Washington, because this doesn't happen, of course, in New York, but if a man walks up and puts a gun to your head and says, give me your money, wouldn't you rather know where he's coming from before he had the gun in his hand? And these people, in 3 or 4 years, are going to be having nuclear weapons. They're going to have those weapons pointed all over the world, and specifically at the United States. And wouldn't you be better off solving this really potentially unbelievable, and the biggest problem, I mean, we can talk about the economy, we can talk about Social Security. The biggest problem this world has is nuclear proliferation. And we have a country out there in North Korea, which is sort of wacko, which is not a bunch of dummies, and they are going out and they are developing nuclear weapons. And they're not doing it because they're having fun doing it. They're doing it for a reason. And wouldn't it be good to sit down and really negotiate something, and ideally negotiate? Now, if that negotiation doesn't work, you better solve the problem now than solve it later, Tim. And you know it, and every politician knows it, and nobody wants to talk about it. Jimmy Carter, who I really like, and he went over there. It was so soft. These people are laughing at us.
So continuing theme with the president, back when he was a private citizen, he found it, very upsetting that other countries would get deals with the United States that didn't reflect the nature of the relationship. The United States being the superpower and the other nation being someone who needed something from us. And instead of getting something in return, we would often give concessions, coal, money, other material, things that they needed to do things in their country. And we would do all of that just for them saying they'd put their nuclear program on hold, such as the case with North Korea. Now, we did listen to a little bit yesterday about how they often do this. They play this game. They're trying to buy time. Ambassador Bolton feels that's all this is. It's an exercise in kind of deflecting away from what their real goal is, which is to have nuclear capability and be at the same level as the United States when it pertains to having the ability to strike anywhere in the world, and to have that before the end of this calendar year. Now, we're going to have Nicholas Grossman, professor of international relations at the University of Illinois. He's going to come on and speak with us today. And I think, every time he's been on, he's an expert, and he's been so good at kind of deciphering what the true nature of kind of the intents of Kim Jong-un and so on and so forth. And so it's important that we do that again. So we're going to speak with him. And then in hour 2, we have Demetrius Minor, director of Generation Opportunity. Now, Demetrius is our associate booking producer, but this is his new role with Americans for Prosperity. And he has a significant victory under his belt. He hasn't even been there 6 months yet. And this is something that he's been lobbying for and working really hard to get passed in the Florida legislature. And so it's a good thing for him to come on and talk to us about this free speech provision that is now a part of all the college campuses in the state of Florida. And I think it's really important for us to hear about it, because then we can consider and hopefully see the same kinds of results in states across the country, which goes to a little bit of audio we listened to yesterday, where we heard that New York Times reporter talking about college campuses being full to the brim of wusses, people who can't afford, or they can't tolerate hearing a dissenting view or opinion. So it's important for us to celebrate these victories. So we'll be doing that with him in hour 2. So let's get back to Meet the Press with Tim Russert back in 1999. 1999. Before I had any kids. Like, this is a long time ago. Trump says we should stop bribing North Korea with free fuel and supplies. It's number 5.
The former general of the Air Force, Merrill McPeak, the former Secretary of Defense, Les Aspin, said you could not launch a preemptive strike against North Korea because the nuclear fallout could be devastating to the Asian Peninsula.
I'm not talking about us using nuclear weapons. I'm saying that they have areas where they're developing missiles.
No, but taking out their nuclear potential would create a fallout.
Tim, do you know that this country went out and gave them nuclear reactors, free fuel for 10 years? We virtually tried to bribe them into stopping, and they're continuing to do what they're doing, and they're laughing at us. They think we're a bunch of dummies. I'm saying that we have to do something to stop.
But if the military told you, Mr. Trump, we can't do this.
You give me 2 names. You're giving me 2 names. I don't know. Do you want to do it in 5 years when they have warheads all over the place, every one of them pointing to New York City, to Washington, and every one of our... Is that when you want to do it? Or do you want to do something now? You better do it now. And if they think you're serious, I deal with lots of people. If they think you're serious, they'll negotiate, and it'll never come to that.
Okay. So does that sound radically different from current discussions? Does that sound moderately different from what he's saying right now? Or does it sound pretty much the same, meaning that he's held these views for decades now, and part of the reason why he finally decided he was going to pull the trigger and actually run for the presidency is that he'd waited long enough for others to do this, and when others won't do it, sometimes you just have to drop what you're doing and go do it yourself. And so that's what we're seeing. I think it's interesting. And I don't hold out hope that there's going to be some radical departure from previous behaviors by Kim Jong-un. I don't even trust that this process is being set up in such a way to be advantageous to the United States. Obviously, it's not. But the president has said through his own spokesperson, Sarah Huckabee Sanders, and others, including his own mouth, he's said, the intention of having this meeting is to denuclearize this country, North Korea. If that is not achievable, then a strong hand will have to be taken, strong measures against the regime. I do feel like it's unfortunate. If you think about it, it's really unfortunate. We're in a situation where, had we had some good, strong leadership, Republican or Democrat, at any point over the last 25 years and been decisive, we could have taken care of this problem. But by kicking the can down the road, we're now within months of them becoming a nuclear power after doing all of the little patty cake dances in the world to try to stop it. I think it's unfortunate. Good news, he's willing to tackle the problem. He's taking a different road with it, and rightly so. So some of these things are going to be what we're going to ask Nicholas Grossman about in the next segment. It's going to be good to chat with him again. It's been a little bit since we had him on the program. I also want to give you a little preview. If you wanted to know something about, I don't know, women, would you ask a man about it, or would you ask a woman? Now, I know if you're listening to the show and you're a leftist, you're probably triggered right now, because the first question that pops into your mind is, how do I know if someone that I'm asking that appears to be a man is actually a man without asking them? Because if I don't ask first what your preferred pronoun is, then I'm misgendering you. That's the kind of nonsense that is the purview of people who don't understand biology or science. And since I don't think like that, I'm perfectly comfortable in saying that if I want to know something about women, I'll ask a woman, an actual woman, not a woman who, a man who thinks they're a woman, someone who's mentally ill, someone who's dressing as a woman but still has all of the biology of a man. That's not what I would do. So we're going to listen to Caitlyn Jenner talking about being a woman with a man voice and man parts and man DNA. And he's on CNN. They actually took time out to ask this man what it was like to be a woman on International Women's Day. Yeah, so we'll be talking about that. And we also have this really great audio of Justin Danhoff. You guys will know him. He's from the Free Enterprise Project, which is a part of National Center. I'm also a part of National Center. I'm on staff there as their co-chair of Project 21. And he actually attended the Disney shareholder meeting as a shareholder and asked Bob Iger two of the best questions I've heard so far ask the CEO of a television and media company. So we're going to be listening to that audio and getting an understanding of why this is now a national news story. Hint, it has something to do with Joy Behar. All right. When we get back, we'll have our first guest, Nicholas Grossman. Stay right there. Stacy on the right. Friday. It's time for a frequent guest of the program to reappear as our foreign policy yet again turns to Kim Jong-un and North Korea. It's Nicholas Grossman, professor of international relations at the University of Illinois. Thank you so much, Nicholas, for joining us today.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Yeah, so let's talk. It's Kim Jong-un, and he's going to meet with President Trump. And apparently, one of the parts of the discussion could possibly be the cessation of his nuclear aspirations, which I actually don't think is really going to happen. But anyway.
So it's possible that they walk back the talks or that the United States asks for some conditions and Kim doesn't meet them, or any variation on that. But I think it, at least so far, was a pretty exciting overture. Here was North Korea surprising South Korea by saying that they wanted to talk to the U.S. and wanted to put the nuclear program on the table and were willing to freeze the missile tests and nuclear tests that have been angering the United States and angering a lot of the world. They had 16 missile tests in 2017, just last year, and every one of them we got upset about. And so for them even to move in that direction is a positive step. And yesterday, President Trump said that he would meet with Kim Jong-un one-on-one, which is the first time that a U.S. president will meet, if it does happen, will be the first time a U.S. president meets with the leader of North Korea.
I know. And so I've seen both reactions online, Nicholas. I've seen, okay, this is a trap. It's a trap. Don't fall for it. I've also seen he's basically validating the leadership of North Korea by meeting with him. In other words, he gives him the power to say he's met with, the leader of the free world, the head of the United States. And then I've also seen, we played a little audio from the comms director from the Obama administration back when he was in office. She said, well, this is something that we considered, but it was so unpopular. And she thinks that it could actually work. And she's glad that he's going to take the meeting. So I'm glad he's doing it because at least it's a movement in one direction, which means after they talk, then you have to kind of make a choice about what you're going to do because you can't any longer act as if you don't know what his intentions are.
Right. And I'd say I'm pretty positive. I fall more in the camp of saying that I think it's a good development. One reason is I don't really buy the argument that agreeing to meet with somebody is a huge concession. So I was trying to think through what would Kim Jong-un gain just for meeting with the president, because, of course, meeting doesn't mean he has to agree to anything. If it's a bad deal, he, of course, can always walk away. So meeting, it would be, well, Kim Jong-un gets some photos, gets maybe some video of him meeting with the American president. He can show his people, and that's true, but he shows his people all sorts of stuff and makes all these outlandish claims and, things like he could drive when he was 3, and he shot 11 holes in one, and he invented the hamburger. Those are all true. I don't mean that they're true that he actually did. I mean they're true that he says it. The United States is afraid of him.
He tells these things to the North Koreans?
Yes, that's correct.
Wait, how do we know that he tells them that he could drive when he was 3 years old? How do we know that?
Well, they put out propaganda that say, some of which gets into South Korea or gets elsewhere.
Okay, tell us more.
That, there are all these myths that the Kims have claimed. So he's claiming all these things, and he claims that, leaders are afraid of him or bowing down before him. And, when he was insulting Trump on Twitter, he was saying, look, the president is afraid of me. So I don't think it would be something that would change substantially his domestic power by getting a meeting with the U.S. president. And internationally, everybody knows that North Korea is this really oppressive place, that Kim is a dictator, that he's not to be trusted, and in a similar sense, I don't think the rest of the world is going to say, oh, well, if he met with the U.S. president, that really raises his stature in our eyes. So I think that part's a little exaggerated, the complaint that just by meeting with him, it will give him this really great victory. So I see it as a positive step because the past attempts at North Korea, this is something where we really have tried many different strategies, and none of them have succeeded. That North Korea's missile programs, nuclear programs have advanced. They haven't really seemed to lose power. Kim Il-sung, the founder, was able to pass power to Kim Jong-il, who was then able to pass power to his son, the current ruler, Kim Jong-un. So I don't think that saying, well, this is the way that we've always done it, and so we need to stick to that, I don't think that argument is as strong as some of the critics are making it out to be. And I think there's an opportunity. It's a long shot, but there's an opportunity for a breakthrough.
Okay, so I want to make sure that I don't want to be too excited about it, but I also don't want to be the ultimate pessimist and act as if I have any idea what's going to happen, because I don't. Where do you see them? So they have to meet somewhere. Do you see our president traveling to the Korean Peninsula to facilitate it, or do you see Kim Jong-un actually coming to the United States? And what's the position of power, to have him come to us or to not allow him to come to American soil? Like, how does that part work? Because I know everything is taken to mean something, every little part of the process.
I think that's an interesting question, and they don't seem to have really thought that through yet. You know, Kim made the offer without saying it. Trump agreed to the offer without saying it. I would guess the best place, because there's that feeling of whoever goes to the other's country is somehow giving in some way, that the best place would be South Korea or maybe Japan, that would require Kim Jong-un to travel, and he might be paranoid that he's going to be kidnapped or killed. But if he really wants to talk to the United States, that would have to be a risk that he's going to take. And we're not putting the President of the United States in the middle of North Korea, and I really doubt that Kim would fly to Washington. So given that South Koreans are a big part of this negotiation too, that they're right there across the border, that North Korea has some relationship with them and their U.S. ally, South Korea would probably be the logical place.
Okay, so what would you, if he were to call up and say, hey, send us over your recommendations for what we should demand, or what would reasonably be what we could expect? Even because I don't think Donald Trump's going to demand things that are actually within the realm of possibility, because that's his negotiating style. He always asks for the moon and then comes down somewhere closer to what he really knew all along he could get. What can we get out of this?
So I think there are three possibilities. One is to go big, go big or go home. And he could, as a negotiating style, ask for a lot. And the biggest thing would be denuclearization, that North Korea gives up its nukes, becomes a normal country, and that's extremely unlikely. Having nuclear weapons are the way that the Kim regime can survive. They know what happened to Saddam in Iraq, they know what happened to Gaddafi in Libya, and this is a way that they can deter foreign adversaries, including the U.S., that the United States could win a war if we had to, but we really don't want to fight one and face all the casualties that North Korea could inflict. So I don't think that would happen, but something like a freeze to further nuclear development, and especially something focused on North Korea's missile program, because that's developed a lot recently. And just in the past year, they flew a missile over Japan, and they tested one that they demonstrated could probably hit the United States. That it was able to travel far enough. I mean, they fired it up instead of sideways, but it traveled far enough that it could hit continental United States, and not just Alaska, but definitely hit the West Coast. And if Trump can get North Korea to demonstrably reduce some of its missile capacity, so bring in some inspectors, show, this is what we have, and we're going to, give up a few of these, we're going to keep some, we're not giving up our nuclear weapons, but we won't keep developing these ICBMs, and in exchange, then the U.S. could hypothetically give things like diplomatic recognition, a peace treaty. Technically, the Korean War never ended. We never really had a formal peace treaty. And especially sanctions relief, because that's probably what North Korea wants most. And then there's also the little kind of baby steps where North Korea gets a little bit of a bribe, and maybe they promise to do something. But if I had to guess, I think that's the sort of deal that Trump wouldn't go for, and I wouldn't recommend that he go for, because that's what Bill Clinton did. That's what George W. Bush did, even a smaller version of it. And every time that North Korea got some sort of bribe, things like a bunch of fuel that they can use to, in power plants or for heating, and in exchange for promises to stop being aggressive, to stop testing, all they do is take the bribe, use it for a little while, hold off on more weapons development or more aggression, and then start acting out again and try to get another bribe. So doing that would kind of be a sucker's move. But going for something bigger is perhaps something that the president can achieve, and I would recommend aim high. Really go for it. Why not?
Okay, so, wow. This is a lot to kind of digest. Okay, so let's hypothetical it out. So there's been a number of things out in the media where, people have been on different shows talking about this same topic. And in those discussions, they've kind of broached the past behaviors as you just did. Like, he usually asks for concessions, gets them, and then, keeps on with their end goal. And they want to be able to not just protect the Kim regime, but they want to be able to maintain their closed society, because the only way he gets away with telling the kinds of stories you were just regaling us with about him driving at 3 and, him being so much taller and bigger and better than everyone else and all this other stuff is that his society remains closed. In order for us to ensure that he has, let's say, he's going to slow the program down and he agrees to that, it means you have to have inspections. But wide mass scale inspections completely obliterate this idea that America is afraid of them, and there's no way he allows that. So how does he get any of this stuff with the Trump administration? Because they seem like they're much less inclined to believe him when he puts the football up like Lucy and then says, "Come on, Charlie Brown, kick this." I just don't see him doing it.
So I agree. I agree that it's not a great chance. If it was easy, then it would have happened already. Mm-hmm. So there's always an opportunity there's always a possibility that North Korea does the same thing, like Lucy with Charlie Brown, and just says, give me a bribe and we promise we'll stop, and then we give them a little bribe, but then they don't. But there's also a possibility that Kim could be first strafing under the sanctions, that he's really feeling a lot of burden from sanctions that have been increasing steadily in response to all of these tests. He can look to China and see that in China's case, they're still an authoritarian country, but they've opened up their economy more, and they have, more open diplomacy with other countries, and that could be a potential model for him. And also, to some extent, I think he's probably at least seriously considering the possibility that Trump might actually go to war. So one thing that's different about these negotiations is that Trump had been issuing a lot of threats in ways that his predecessors never did before. And not only, things on Twitter and saying that, North Korea would be met with fire and fury and other lines like that, but also moving a lot of U.S. Navy assets, like some aircraft carriers, to the region, testing some overflights, and showing that the United States is looking at this as, if you don't do something, if you don't cut a deal with us, that's it, we can't take it anymore, we're going to attack. And there's no way to know if the president actually wants to attack or if he's trying to do this to make Kim nervous, but that creates a different backdrop for negotiations. So it is possible, and I don't think it's likely, I don't want to get too optimistic, but it's possible that Kim looks at this and says, if I don't make some sort of real concession, there's going to be a war. And while I won't give away anything unless I get something good in return, I am at least willing to give away something as opposed to just try to pull the same old tricks.
And at this point, and I really don't like asking this question, but I do feel like I have to ask you this. So before they get full nuclear capability, so anytime before they actually have a nuclear capable warhead with carriage, a missile to put it on, we can win a war against them. But after that, we might win, but we might also lose huge casualties and major damage to the United States because he would be able to reach our shores. Is that the situation as it stands?
I think we've already crossed that threshold. That it's not something I'm happy to say, of course, but I think we're already past that. So it's not clear that North Korea yet has been able to miniaturize a nuclear weapon and fit it on a missile where it could then hit, say, San Francisco or Los Angeles. But they have a number of nuclear weapons. The United States estimates up to 60. They have a lot of advanced missile capabilities, and they could do a lot of damage to South Korea and Japan. And not only are those both allies, but there are also a lot of Americans there. So there are 28,500 American troops in South Korea, all within range of North Korean artillery. And there are hundreds of thousands of Americans who live in South Korea or Japan. I actually think millions when you combine both together.
Millions?
Or visiting American personnel, other military personnel in Japan, so that are all within range. And even if North Korea can't actually blow up an American city, the price that they can extract is extremely high, and there's no good military way to prevent that before they're able to get off a lot of shots. So I think we're already at the point where war would be prohibitively expensive. It's the sort of thing where only if they force it does it make sense.
I had no idea that millions of Americans lived in South Korea and Japan. That is amazing. As usual, fantastic analysis. Thank you so much for coming on today and educating us even further on this situation. I look forward to speaking with you about this again shortly, soon, very soon. Nicholas Grossman, Professor of International Relations at the University of Illinois. Thank you for your time today.
Great, thanks. Thanks for having me.
All right, talk to you again soon. All right, we'll be back with more Stacy on the right after this. Stay tuned.
St. John 1:1 says, "In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God." Remember in the Word when Jesus was responding to Satan's antics? When Satan was trying to tempt Jesus with food, Jesus responded with himself. He responded with the Word. There are no new tricks in Satan's book. At the end of the day, his job is to create fear and doubt, and steal, kill, and destroy. So if Jesus, who is fully God, responded to Satan with the Word, why do we think that we can get along without the Word? The Bible says, "Study to show thyself approved." Equip yourself with the Word daily and watch your response to Satan's foolishness change. One of my coworkers, Pastor Joseph Parker, teaches that it's good to read at least 3 chapters a day. Sounds good to me. Today is a good day to start. With a heart for the urban family, I'm today's urban woman, Tony Johnson. Connect with us at urbanfamilytalk.com.
Family is an institution set forth by God. One man and one woman for life, with the outflow being children produced by that union. It's obvious to all that there is an attack on the family in our country, and especially on fathers. Whether it's the cycle of sin that persists in our families or the pressure from our government to exclude men from being intimately involved, the strategic battle is on for the souls of men. Join us in the battle to strengthen fatherhood. urbanfamilytalk.com.
Hi, my name is Elias. The first time I ever tried cocaine, I was 11 years old, and I just knew that somebody that I cared about asked me to try it, and I did. Since coming to Teen Challenge, I've been set free.
If you know an adult or teenager who's struggling with a chemical addiction, Teen Challenge can help. Call us today at 417-581-2181 or reach us online at teenchallengeusa.com. This is Urban Family Talk.
Hi, this is Steve Tiber with 8 Days of Hope. We've seen God open up so many doors for us to help serve and love those who get affected by a natural disaster.
As the trees and the wind started crashing down around us, my wife was, of course, very diligently praying, Lord, please be with us.
Very simply, we do it because God commands us to love others.
I see these volunteers all as a gift from God.
And I'm just grateful they're here, helping out is a blessing.
If you're interested in becoming a part of what God's doing through 8 Days of Hope, please go to 8daysofhope.com, click on Get Involved, submit your email address.
I've noticed that whenever there's a time in my life when things might be a little gloomy, the number one thing that I can do is to go serve somebody.
And I would encourage anyone else to, it's worth it. Come out and do it next time if you didn't make it to this one, and the Father will really bless you in it.
Thank you so much for your prayers and volunteering with 8 Days of Hope.
This is Stacy on the Right on Urban Family Talk.
My path to womanhood was very different, and through that process I think I learned a lot about women. Women are kind of brought up to be kind of a second-class citizen, emotionally weaker, physically weaker. I've always been inspired by strong women.
Hey guys, welcome back to Stacy on the Right. I don't know if you guys noticed that, you just heard the voice of a man talking about being a woman, and that's Bruce Jenner, who is now known as Caitlyn Jenner. And I don't care anything about misgendering him or not doing the pronouns correctly. I really care about science. And I know that's probably a weird position for leftists who would hear me take that position. They say, oh, how dare you? You can't have a position that's about science. Yes, I can. I sure can. That's a man. That's a man, baby. That was a man talking about how women are brought up to be physically weaker than men. No, we're not brought up that way. We are physically weaker than men because we are women and we do not have the same amount of testosterone and body mass that's made up of muscle. It's pretty simple. Again, science. We also are not brought up to be emotionally weaker. We are more in tune with our emotions because that is the role that we have been given by God. We've been blessed to be more emotionally intelligent, where men are physically stronger and they are more logically inclined, I guess we could say. Does that mean women don't have logic? Don't start with me. Today's Friday. I'm not going there today, okay? We know that there are natural inherent differences between women and men, and that there are men and women who are differently inclined. It doesn't make them any less men or women. We are all gifted and created for a specific purpose that God has ordained for us. And so our unique gifts and attributes are for that particular purpose. It doesn't mean that you're not a woman if you are more logically minded, or you're really great at math and science, and, you know, or you're physically stronger than the average woman. It doesn't mean you're not a woman. You just are uniquely gifted. And when we look at each other that way, we're much less likely to be taken in by the idea that one day you can be a man, and then the next day you can be a woman, that very next day. And then you start working towards making yourself appear on the outside what you have going on in your brain. And then you just keep on doing that until finally you are a woman, even though genetically speaking, on the DNA level, you're still a man. Hello? So I just thought it was interesting that CNN would take the time out as they were speaking with women about International Women's Day to ask Caitlyn Jenner something. First of all, he's not even doing anything with the treatments that would change his voice. Maybe it's too late. I don't know. I just don't understand why he gets to weigh in. Are there no more women left in this country? Is that what the problem is? Do we not have any women that you can ask, what do you feel about International Women's Day? No, we had to ask a man. You know, for a country that claims that women are so oppressed and it's so horrible, why would any man want to regender themselves into being a woman? If what he said was true, why is he currently living as a woman? If women are brought up to be weaker and emotionally weaker and physically weaker, then why is he living as one? Jeez. I mean, so there's that. And then I want to go back to something that Nicholas Grossman was talking about. So, all right, first of all, so he's always so informative. You know, obviously he's a professor, and so he's just, you know, he's just an information guru when it comes to the analysis on what's going on in North Korea and the things he was sharing about the propaganda that the dictator of North Korea puts out. How much of a loser do you have to be to try to convince people that you could drive a car when you were 3 years old? Like, can't you just talk about other cool stuff that you could do without making up stuff that's so implausible? How did his feet reach the pedals of the car if he was 3 years old? Or was he the same size when he was 3 that he is now? Like, that kind of ridiculous stuff. It just throws you off the whole discussion. So I looked up on worldpopulationreview.com. It says in 2018, Japan's population was 127,276,000+. It has 6,852 islands. The 4 largest are Honshu, Hokkaido, Kyushu, and Shikoku. And that's where 97% of the population lives. And with 128 million people as of the 2010 census, that would make it the 10th largest country in the world. So it goes into a little bit of discussion about the population of Japan being in line for some serious decline because of their birth rate. They're actually in a death spiral because they haven't had enough children to have replacement rate. They have a pretty high population density of 336 people per square kilometer, the 40th most densely populated country on the planet. And they have a very homogenous country. 98.5% of their people are ethnic Japanese people. They have a very small population of foreign workers living there, largely made up of Koreans, Chinese, Peruvians, and Brazilians. And it doesn't say much about how many of the people living there are Americans. Now, at the top of the search, when you put in how many Americans live in Japan, it says, according to 1990 census figures, there were 847,000 Japanese Americans in the United States. But it doesn't talk about how many live in Japan. So it's pretty interesting. Pretty interesting that he was saying that between South Korea and Japan, you have, that's a lot of people. That's a lot of Americans. But that's why I asked the question. And so call lines are open if you want to weigh in on this, 866-963-2037. I asked the question about how many Americans live there because I'm aware that Americans live on the military bases there. My husband used to be stationed in Japan before he and I had ever met. He actually moved to the base where we met. We moved there within 5 days of each other. He was coming from Japan, and I was moving there from basic training, which I was in San Antonio, Texas. And we arrived within 5 days of each other and met about 5 days after I arrived there. And so he immediately told me that he'd come directly over to that base in Florida from Japan. And I was fascinated by it when I hear all about what, living in Japan was like, because he was there for 3 years. It's interesting that that's the way that Kim Jong-un can negotiate with the leader of our country. He now has possibly the capability, probably more than likely has the capability to strike the United States. But he also could just focus on striking Japan and South Korea. Although you have to understand, if he were to hit South Korea or Japan with nuclear weapons, it would create fallout that would damage him. It would be negative for his country. It's the reason why we don't hit North Korea with nuclear weapons, because we don't want to destroy the peninsula for the people who live in South Korea, which is much more heavily populated, much more developed. It's a beautiful country. And really, why would we want to destroy it? Why do we want to hit them with nuclear weapons at all? It's not our goal to be in a nuclear war with Japan. So I did get a few phone calls. And by the way, just for housekeeping stuff, I'm filling in again today on the Hamilton Corner. I had a good conversation yesterday with a number of listeners yesterday on the Hamilton Corner, and that starts at 5 p.m. Central. And then I want you guys to keep eyes peeled online. I have a new piece going up about the NRA and gun control and the Parkland shooting over at the Washington Times. So that should be coming out. I'm not sure what day it's going to hit, so definitely be looking online for that. I'll share it. And please read and share those. It's important for us to keep the writing side up, because that's the record of everything. That's how we can go back and track and see what was going on, what was opinion during this time or that time. So that's why I still do some of that writing. So there's that. And then I was saying there's this piece from Caroline Phelps. Independent Women's Forum sent out a huge press release today, and they're calling President Trump meeting with Kim Jong-un a concession by the United States. Now, remember when we were just talking with Nicholas Grossman, he was saying he shies away from those kinds of characterizations because we don't know what's going to happen. And we do need to have conversations with him, but we also need to be really firm. And that was interesting that Nicholas said that it's that kind of rhetoric and that kind of almost crazed Twitter presence that the president maintains that could be one of the reasons why he is much more willing to talk, because he doesn't know what President Trump is going to do. I like that, although the idea of us going to war with anyone is something I don't want that. I don't want us going to war with anyone. But I do like having a leader who has a posture that puts other leaders back on their heels, that they don't know what he's going to do. They don't feel like he's so laid back and academic that he would, basically allow a smack across the face, which is that's the equivalent to what Kim Jong-un has been doing, flying missiles over Japan, flying missiles up in the air high enough to demonstrate that he has the distance capability to reach the United States. That's the gentleman's, you take off the leather gloves, you smack your opponent across the face. That's the precursor to a duel. only that only involves 2 people. He's trying to duel with the United States. And what he's gotten back from President Trump is he's gotten back a push and a smack. You know, President Trump isn't going to put up with that. And his rhetoric has escalated to the point that Kim Jong-un, I imagine he wants to sit down and meet him because he wants to look him in the eye. And, you know, that's a thing that men like to do. They like to look each other in the eye because you can see the resolve of a person. You can shake their hand and look them in the eye and get the feeling for whether or not that individual is made of anything. And I think when he does encounter President Trump, he's going to find that he's a wily guy and he's not putting up with any drama. So, okay, I want to give you some information to call about the Share-a-thon, but I also want to go over this really quickly. So I'm going to just give you kind of a nutshell of what the press release from the Independent Women's Forum is. And I respect the women over there. It's an amazing organization, and they have some very intelligent, thoughtful information that they put out. And they're pretty upset by the idea that the president is going to meet with North Korean dictator Kim Jong-un. She feels like, and this is Caroline Phelps, the senior manager of strategic communications for the Independent Women's Forum. She says this looks more like a historic trap for the U.S. than a historic opportunity, having all the hallmarks of yet another grand bamboozle by North Korea's regime. Now, she goes back through the history and talks about how the Kim dynasty has snookered and played the U.S. repeatedly with rotten nuclear deals, deceptions going all the way back to 1950, when they launched a surprise invasion of the South, triggering the brutal 1950 to 1953 Korean War. So she feels like President Trump dignifying North Korea's tyrant Kim Jong-un with a face-to-face meeting is itself a concession. She says it dignifies the totalitarian dictator by sitting at the same table to bargain as an equal with the elected leader of the world's leading democracy. And in exchange for what? Because they haven't given anything up. And then she goes through a little bit of the history and the rapid advances that they've recently made to their program. And it kind of echoes the comments that Nicholas Grossman was making last segment on the program. So I understand her outrage, but I'm trying to figure out what our options are. And she doesn't really give any of them. She doesn't talk about any other alternative to meeting with him. And I think one of the best parts about what President Trump is doing in meeting with him is that they have not relented. And every time they talk about the meeting, they talk about if it doesn't go well, then we're going back to the more stringent, ever increasing sanctions. And, you know, we're not giving anything up. I mean, what are our options here? I'm interested in them doing whatever it takes to remove the threat of this dictator trying to, move against the United States and our interests. The good thing is we have a lot of allies and we have interests in that part of the world. The bad thing is we have allies and interests in that part of the world. And Kim Jong-un is intimately and acutely aware of how much we do not want to see our allies, Japan and South Korea, harmed by him. He knows that. He knows what's on the table. He knows the stakes are high. But what he doesn't know is when you say the stakes are high, what happens? What would the president do? So what we're looking for you guys to do is the Share-a-thon is coming up. And one of the things we like to do is have you guys call in and tell us how our programming is impacting your life. And we know that it's impacting you because you guys have emailed us. You guys have done so many things to let us know how much you enjoy the programming. So please go to the website, get the number from there so that you can share with us how we're impacting you. And I'll give that number out at the top of the hour when we get back right after these messages. So stay right there. It's Stacy on the Right.
Would you like to know how you can help the American Family Association celebrate our 40th anniversary? It's simple. All you have to do is purchase your very own In God We Trust poster. You can frame and display it in your home, office, classroom, or get permission to hang it in a public building. Help us remind America of our national motto. Order yours today at afastore.net. That's afastore.net.
Truth, wisdom, empowerment. Urban Family Talk, a ministry of the American Family Association.
American Family News, I'm Rusty Pugh. There's good news coming out of the February jobs report. Adam Shapiro has more.
313,000 jobs created in February. The unemployment rate holds at 4.1% as 806,000 people enter the labor force. That is the largest one-month gain since 1983, 35 years. January revisions from 200,000 up to 239,000. December revision up from 160,000 to 175,000, a net gain of 54,000 jobs. The participation rate, again, up 63% as 806,000 people enter the labor force. The U6 holds steady at 8.2%.
President Trump surprised the world by accepting an invitation to meet with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un. Greg Palcott reports from London.
A South Korean delegation carried an invitation from Kim Jong-un to President Trump for a meeting after their meeting in Pyongyang earlier this week. At the time, there were indications that there could be a suspension of missile launches and tests by the North Korean regime, as well as talk seriously about denuclearization. President Trump has accepted. The timing of the summit is a bit of a scramble. By most accounts, it seems by the end of May. That's still a short time to prepare. The venue also to be decided. It could very well be at a neutral position like along the DMZ. Experts are divided about whether this thing could work. Some say it's a win for Kim Jong-un. He always wanted to meet with the president on equal footing. Others see it as a win for the president. He gets to continue, for example, his joint U.S.-South Korean military drills. And finally, others see it as a win for South Korean President Moon. Remember, he'll have the first summit with Kim Jong-un, yes, along that DMZ. In London, Greg Palcott, Fox News.
The U.S. Department of Justice intends to force the state of California to obey the law. The feds have filed a lawsuit against California for protecting illegal aliens in violation of federal law. Sarah Flores is Director of Public Affairs for the Justice Department. She said California and any other state must know that they cannot pick and choose which laws they obey and which ones they don't.
But I think this is why this is a very important lawsuit that the Department of Justice has brought, because federal immigration law has to preempt the states deciding willy-nilly which immigration laws they want to comply with and which ones they simply don't agree with. In fact, what we really need to do is have people in their communities standing up to these politicians that think that they're scoring political points with putting law enforcement in danger every time that they do this. It's incredible that they think that's a way to win elections.
Lawsuits by Satanists against Missouri abortion laws may have an ulterior motive. Charlie Butts has that story.
The first, now before the Missouri Supreme Court, argues against the 72-hour waiting period before a woman can terminate her unborn child's life. Susan Klein of Missouri Right to Life tells AFN the second lawsuit challenges the informed consent law, which states clearly when life begins and that abortion terminates the life of a living human being.
They continue to try to disavow and not recognize exactly what science says, is that life begins at conception. And if you look at the ultrasounds and the new modern technology that we have today, it's just proving the truth about what's going on when a woman is pregnant.
The lawsuits have received a wide array of publicity in print and broadcast media, which may be the purpose of the lawsuits.
I think they're just, trying to get recognition for their position, and their position is not medically accurate and it's not factual. So I agree. I think they're just trying to get headlines.
Regardless of the motive, Attorney General Josh Hawley is taking both lawsuits seriously and is determined to uphold the constitutionality of the laws. I'm Charlie Butts.
And a former Trump campaign aide has arrived at the federal courthouse in Washington for a scheduled grand jury appearance. Sam Nunberg had insisted in a series of defiant interviews earlier in the week that he intended to defy a subpoena issued by special counsel Robert Mueller's office. American Family News is available online at onenewsnow.com and download the One News Now mobile app for your Apple or Android device. I'm Rusty Pugh.
Where there is no prophetic vision, the people cast off restraint. But blessed is he who keeps the law. Our country is suffering because of lack of leadership, division, and a disdain for godliness. Urban Family Talk exists to be a prophetic voice as we speak on matters of religion, family, and culture. We will not be silent on issues plaguing our communities today as we sound the alarm of truth, wisdom, and empowerment. Join the movement at urbanfamilytalk.com.
Welcome to Stacy on the Right with your host, Stacy Washington.
We filed a resolution that simply asked the company's media platforms to either be honest or provide evidence that they have a policy requiring honesty on their media platforms. You guys actually spent a lot of money, hired a white shoe law firm to fight that at the SEC. We find that strange when trust in media is at an all-time low, that you would spend shareholder resources to fight a simple request for honesty. And the distrust of Disney's media platforms is well earned. I think we all here probably know the example of ESPN, which has seemingly become a 24/7 anti-Trump tirade channel, which reached its pinnacle last fall when Jemele Hill called President Donald Trump a white supremacist. Mr. Iger, you admitted in an interview that you intervened to make sure ESPN's leadership didn't fire her for these defamatory remarks. What kind of message does that send to other company employees? Just last month, she again repeated this. She said that not only President Trump, but his supporters are white supremacists. How does she still have a job? Also consider the February 13th broadcast of ABC's The View. Co-host Joy Behar and Sonny Hostin suggested that Christianity is, quote, and I'm quoting them, dangerous, and that Christians, and again I'm quoting them, Christians suffer from mental illness. In response, the show's advertisers have come under tremendous pressure to sever ties with these anti-Christian bigots. This pattern shows the company is willing to take a reputational and a financial hit just so long as it's in service to bashing conservatives and religious Americans. That's a shame.
So the voice you just heard there, welcome back to the show, Stacy Washington, host of Stacy on the Right and co-chair of National Center's Project 21, 866-963-2037 are the call lines. They're wide open for you. And you were just listening to Justin Danhoff of the Free Enterprise Center, and he attended Disney's shareholder meeting, and he asked that question of Bob Iger, CEO of Disney. And so it was kind of tough. You could hear other shareholders in the background and activists, kind of heckling Justin when he was doing this, asking this question, but he kept powering through. Now, the answer that Bob Iger gave is, to me, supremely unsatisfactory because it isn't so much whether or not Bob Iger finds the comments to be repugnant or agrees with them. It's the company's position and whether or not they're going to force Joy Behar to apologize publicly to the millions of Christians who were also insulted while watching the program as she insulted Vice President Mike Pence. Now, she called him and he turned the other cheek, as a Christian would do. When someone apologizes, you accept their apology, and you have to move on. That's what Christ calls us to do. But the larger issue here is the posturing of the company itself. And Justin Danhoff didn't just call them out for their bigotry against Christians that they display regularly on The View on ABC, which is held under their news division, by the way, which means it should be held to a higher standard than any other regular opinion show. But he also called them out for ESPN's Jemele Hill. They own ESPN as well. He really felt a little overwhelmed at the questioning. And so I want you to listen to his answer. It's interesting that the answer came out this way. And also it's interesting that in the clip, the person who recorded the audio of this exchange chose to cut out the portion where Justin Danhoff announces himself as working for the Free Enterprise Project and also being a shareholder of Disney. So it's the next clip I want to listen to, number 3.
What do you say to the tens of millions of Christians and President Trump supporters that your networks have so blatantly offended and ascribed hateful labels? And specifically, do you think, like Ms. Hostin and Ms. Behar, that the Christian faith is akin to a dangerous mental illness? And do you believe, like Ms. Hill, that President Trump and his supporters are all white supremacists?
I don't know where I start. First of all, Joy Behar apologized to Vice President Pence directly. She made a call to him and apologized, which I thought was absolutely appropriate.
Okay.
I happen to take exception with what she said. I don't think it was right, and I was glad to hear that she apologized. On the Jamel Hill issue, the only thing I have to add to that, because I have said some things publicly, is that Jamel Hill was spoken with and disciplined for the things that she said or the things that she tweeted. And I'm going to leave it at that. And in terms of your depiction of ESPN and a variety of other things you said, I know you've been to other meetings in the past. You and I have agreed to disagree on these issues. Not that some of the things that you raise are, don't have some validity, but I don't agree with everything that you said. But thank you. I respect your right to say them.
Now, I saw the interaction between them characterized as curt, that Bob Iger had curtly ended the meeting. But then I was able to find this audio of the exchange, and I listened to it, and I thought, I'm not sure that he curtly ended that. I think he drew it to an end because he knew that ideologically speaking, he doesn't agree with Justin Danhoff of the Free Enterprise Project. Because in case you are wondering, Justin often travels to shareholder meetings of these major corporations and asks them why they're betraying their shareholders, which shareholders expect shares to go up, to split, and increase in value. The reason they're shareholders is because they want a return on their investment. And as a CEO of a company, it is his duty, Bob Iger's duty, to make actions and to control the companies in such a way that shareholders do not lose value. And so the whole purpose of the Free Enterprise Project is to get these companies to return to their first love, which should be producing products that satisfy customers, satisfying customers, and turning a profit, and get away from this kind of social issue posturing and political participation, which flies in the face of that. Because you're always going to find people who can disagree on politics, but we can all agree when a pizza tastes fantastic or when movies move our souls and are worth sharing and buying on DVD and watching again and again and again. There are some artistic endeavors that stand the test of time and are worth watching, even though they're older than, think about one of my favorites is the one that Charlton Heston acted in. It's basically the story of Moses. And of course, now I can't think of it. It was just on the tip of my tongue. That is one of the movies that we had it on VHS tape. Oh my gosh, you guys, that's what we had it on. I bought it a long time ago. My husband and I first got married. And of course, now we don't have it because we don't have a VHS machine anymore, but we would watch it. And it was amazing. Now, obviously, it's not historically accurate, and there's a whole lot. You can find a lot of problems with it, especially social justice warriors will say a whole lot about the casting choices that were made. But it's the story from the Bible, and it's pretty close to what God's word says, and it's an amazing thing to share and watch and enjoy. And so when people buy shares in Disney, they're not buying shares in a political activism outfit. They're buying shares in a company that they feel is going to make content that will stand the test of time, thereby enriching their shareholders because the company will increase in value. So I think we're going to have Justin Danhoff on the program next week to discuss his interaction with Bob Iger. Apparently they've met before. They've jousted before. And I think, so Justin's been on the program before, and he's a great guy. And I want to talk to him about this interaction and some of their, they have other shareholder meetings scheduled for the remainder of the year that they're going to be attending. And I'm interested in hearing more about that. So we'll do that. We'll get him on the show. So there's that. And then, of course, there's this issue of Joy Behar basically having a private apology for something she said out in public. I don't love it. I don't love it. I think she should have apologized in public. But I also understand that I guess Bob Iger can't force her to do that. But then again, couldn't he? Couldn't he make it a contract issue for her? Couldn't he say, you've embarrassed the company and you're costing us money? And I think if the pressure is sustained, we might see her in less of a role on The View, possibly have to take some time off from The View, possibly next time her contract is up for renewal, they don't bring her back. She said some other things that are quite incendiary since the original, mistake. So we'll see. We'll see what happens with that. So there's also some news that I thought was fantastic. Wait, before we get to that, I need to get, there's a couple other stories I wanted to get to before the end of the program. But before we get to that, I promised you the number. So here's the deal. Every year when we have Share-a-thon twice a year, we love to have listener testimonials where you tell us how Urban Family Talk and American Family Radio are making a difference in your life. How does the show make a difference in your life? And so if you listen on radio, or if you're watching on Facebook or YouTube, or if you're live streaming from, the website, if you're listening on the podcast, however you find the show, it's kind of nice for us. It encourages us, and it helps spur us on in those tougher moments when people are writing in to talk about how much they hate the show. I always think about how many people have said that they really enjoy it or they got something from it. It's a real treat, especially if it's been something that I've kind of grappled with, like, should I even talk about this on the show? And then someone invariably will always say, I didn't know about that, or I hadn't thought about that, or thank you for covering it. I appreciate your perspective, or I disagree with you, but it was interesting the way you presented it. Whatever the case may be, we'd love to know how we motivated you to become more involved in the culture war, or perhaps you have a story about how Urban Family Talk has impacted you in an extraordinary way. We'd love to hear about that. So if you would like to share your story on the air to spotlight the influence of Urban Family, please give us a call at 877-327-5647. Leave your message on there, and then we'll get it, and we'll have it not just to encourage us, but to play during Share-a-thon, which really helps us out a great deal. So we'd appreciate your help with this. The number again is 877-327-5647. So one of the things I wanted to go through today is non-farm payrolls. Yeah, it's Friday, and the jobs numbers always come out on Fridays. It's not just because it was the Obama administration or the Bush administration before that. The normal order of business is that Fridays are the days when they put out the jobs numbers. Non-farm payrolls, so jobs other than in agriculture, rose by 313,000 in the month of February, and the unemployment rate has remained steady at 4.1. This is the lowest since December of 2000. Wage growth was muted, but the average hourly earnings were up 2.6% on an annualized basis, and that's 0.2 percentage points below expectations. Now, the stock market rallied after the initial report was released. Economists surveyed by Reuters had been expecting non-farm payroll growth of 200,000, so it was over the expectation. And the total number of Americans counted as employed by the household survey surged by 785,000. Is that not great news? It is. More people working, more people, the sweat of your brow. You come home, you're tired, but hey, I earned that money today. I got it. I did it. And then you get that paycheck and you're out, buying and taking care of your family's needs. This is what we're called to do this. We're called to work and earn our keep. And this is wonderful news. I don't give President Trump all of the credit, but you have to admit that the business environment has been buoyed by the news of the lower business tax rate, lower taxation overall, and the idea that the regulatory environment has been unleashed by the reduction in regulations. So there's construction jobs leading the way with 61,000 new positions, and then retail and professional and business services each had 50,000 new jobs, and manufacturing had 31,000 new jobs. Financial activities, 28,000 new jobs. Healthcare added 19,000, and mining, an industry that was greatly beleaguered by the Obama administration, saw 9,000 new jobs. So this is fantastic. It's good news, and I'm glad to see it. And hopefully, whether a person is on the left or the right, we can all agree that adding jobs is fantastic. We have 155,215,000 Americans employed, which apparently is a record. And manufacturing added 263,000 jobs. Black and Hispanic unemployment is at historic lows, and the Dow is up by 441 points. So That's good stuff. All right. And that's the first segment. I hear music. Guys, when we get back, we're going to have Demetrius Minor on the air for you from Generation Opportunity down in Florida. Going to love the report that he's going to share with us today on the show. So stay there. We'll be right back.
Hey, my name's Brant. You ever make a change and then wonder, why didn't I do this a long time ago? That's what's happening for thousands of people with regard to their health care. They're joining Medishare, and then they're wondering, why didn't I already do this? For most members, it costs less than half what they were paying for their old health plan. There's a huge provider network, too. You can customize your plan, and this is awesome. Medishare members can go online with a doctor 24/7. So if you need a prescription for the flu or something, it's so convenient for you and your family. So yeah, this is one of those why did I wait on this things. And if you don't love your current health plan, you're not stuck with it. You can join Medishare anytime. By the way, to give you an idea, the typical savings for a family, about $500 a month. It just makes so much sense. Check it out. They're super easy to talk to. Call 855-PSALM-23. That's 855-PSALM-23. 855-PSALM-23.
This is Mason Weaver, bringing you the truth right between their lies.
This is Mason, and welcome back to the program. I want to tell you something. Unless you are blind, you better understand and recognize what is coming your way, Christians. In my book, Tribalism, I point out the fact that you have to be aware of where you stand with God.
Your guess is ready.
Today, in your face, your government is putting Christians in jail for being Christian. You are allowed to be discriminated against. You cannot do business with someone that you don't think is faithful to God, and the government will come down on you. At the same time, those ungodly people have access to your very character. They can force you to think, act, and work a certain way. They are telling you in your face, your God is not as powerful as they are. And once again, the Church of God had better stand up and face the reality. You are under social, political, economic attack because you believe in God. They ridicule you. They make fun of you. They make laws against you. At the same time, the ungodly can come into your business and demand to be treated. As a matter of fact, the ungodly can come into your business and demand a job. They can command to be sitting next to you in your business and not agree with you in business. What are you going to do, church? Because God requires a couple things out of you. You got to decide to please Caesar or please God. Being a Christian is a closed-minded, narrow-minded point of view. Being a Christian is not going to make you popular. You had better be willing to lose your family and everything else. This is Mason. God bless you. See you next time on the Clarence A. Mason Report.
You have been listening to Mason Weaver. Our email address is clarenceamason@clarenceamason.com. Welcome back to Stacy on the Right on Urban Family Talk.
Welcome back to the show. You guys know what time it is. It's time for Demetrius Minor to join us and chat with us about what he's doing down in Florida. How dare he? First of all, how dare he move down there and get a fancy new job with the Koch brothers? Sorry, I mean Gen Op. And then deign to come back on the show and talk to us not once or twice, but regularly about his activities. You know, you guys know I'm kidding. I love this. I'm enjoying this probably too much, but he is my little brother in the Lord. So here we go. Demetrius, Coalitions Director for Generation Opportunity Florida. Welcome to the program.
Stacy, it's nice to plug away from those evil Koch brothers, who do nothing to advance the world through their philanthropy, through their work with education, the free market enterprise. Oh, it feels good to plug away from the 70-degree weather here in Florida and the beaches. Caught me at the right time.
Would you stop it, please? Well, actually, we have good weather here, but it's overcast, but it's not 70. So, we used to live in Florida, so I know exactly what you're talking about. You guys are already enjoying sun, and, the air off the water is so fresh and uplifting. You better stop talking about it. That's all I know.
Will do.
Okay, so tell us about your first major victory as coalitions director down there in Florida. I know you had a team of people that you guys all worked together with legislators to get this done, but this is important. It's so important, and I'm so glad you guys won on this, and I'm hoping other states can replicate your results.
Absolutely. It's a piece of legislation that's entitled the Campus Free Expression Act, and what it does is eliminate these quote-unquote free speech zones on college campuses that are a couple of things. Number one, not constitutional. We see the whole state of Florida and the United States, for that matter, as a free speech zone. Number two, these free speech zones are located in inconvenient places on campuses, small little areas where it's not visible to the whole student body and where it's very hard to locate. And so what this bill does, it eliminates free speech zones on the outdoor areas of college campuses. Also, if a student feels that their First Amendment rights are being stifled, if they feel like they're being infringed upon, there's a cause of action in the bill which allows for the student to make legal action for monetary fees and damages against the student body. So, to me, it makes the universities be more receptive to the First Amendment and more opening to students who want to express, exchange debate, or just simply articulate their thoughts and opinions about a different cause or issue. This bill originally was titled HB 909, and it died in the Senate Judiciary Committee because it was voted against. However, the people who work with AFP, who are just wizards when it comes to the Florida legislature getting bills passed, the whole maneuvering, going behind the scenes magic that it requires, was able to attach this bill to a higher education bill by the Senate President and the House Speaker, meaning that this was one of their high priorities. And so when it was attached to that provision, it passed both the Florida House and the Florida House and Senate, and now pending Governor Scott's signature on this bill, which we have no reason to believe he will veto it, this will become law.
Okay, so that was a detailed and comprehensive look at what you guys went through, but let's just talk about, kind of on the ground, first person retelling of what you experienced in this whole fight. What was it like for you? First of all, you were lobbying. This is something you're new to. You were down in the Florida legislature,
right,
where you have some connections there, but this was a little different because now you're going in a different role. How did you find the experience of lobbying and working to get this done?
It was a very fun experience. It was an educational experience. To be fully candid, I'm familiar with the chambers of the two different chambers, the House and the Senate, and you're familiar with different legislative terms, but I wasn't familiar with the legislative process. And so pretty much shadowing the deputy director for policy in Tallahassee, I was able to meet with lawmakers. I was able to attend committee hearings. I was able to provide testimony on behalf of the bill, and that was just a phenomenal experience. Also, an added bonus was the students who came out in support of this bill. The left, as you know, is a very organized, well-oiled machine, and so they had their representation there to oppose the bill. But we also had good representation, students from Florida State University, which is located about 10 minutes away from the state capitol, and also our very own activists from across the state of Florida, Orlando, Jacksonville, Tampa, just different regions of the state came and lobbied with us at the Capitol, sat in on the hearings, waved in support of the bill. And so this is what grassroots really is. You know, it's not just standing behind a keyboard and posting on Facebook and Twitter, and social media is very effective, but this is actually the real work. When you actually go to these offices, when you actually talk with your elected officials, when you actually do the hard work that is required to get legislation passed and to get people on your side. And I was able to see that up front and personal. And it's a good win for Generation Opportunity, but this is bigger than Demetrius. This is big for students all across the Sunshine State, and hopefully we'll see this all across the nation.
Okay, so now I'm loath to ask, but I'm also excited, like a little chipmunk. What's next? What are y'all going to do next?
Well, we're looking to build momentum off of this. So once it technically becomes law, once the governor signs in a legislation, my job, my duty will be to travel throughout the state of Florida, visiting with different colleges and campuses, and building off of free speech and explaining why this is essential and why this is necessary for a free society. In the works is a free speech presentation that we're planning to give to the Central Florida Urban League and to possibly historical black colleges and universities here in Florida. So building coalitions with those who, on most issues, may not be aligned with us, but see the critical need for free speech and the value that it brings. So we're not going to just sit back here and relish this victory by doing nothing. We're going to build off of the momentum, continue to build coalitions, continue to get the message out there.
Okay. All right. Well, we have other things we'll be discussing offline because I just had a couple of really cool ideas, but they don't have anything to do with your work, so we won't discuss them on the air. But I do want to know.
I'm always open to new ideas.
I know. Well, you might not be open to these, but I'm still going to tell you, just as any other relative would. I'm just going to pour my ideas out on you, and then you have the right to reject them, but I'll just bring them up again later. So, I just realized, I know you've come on before and talked about Gen Op, but could you tell the listeners what it is? Because maybe if someone's just tuning in right now, welcome to the show. It's Demetrius Minor. I'm speaking with Coalitions Director for Generation Opportunity Florida. And this is a division of Americans for Prosperity. But what does Gen Op do? Like, what's the point of that? We all know you're young and you're barely cracking 30.
Right.
But what is Gen Op?
That's a good question. I'm glad you asked it. Generation Opportunity is a nonpartisan grassroots movement that focuses on policies that will benefit young people and students. So, for example, and it varies from state to state, but just a couple of things nationally: free speech, corporate welfare, and how that impacts young people. So like you see like in states like North Carolina and other states as well, where Amazon is actually pushing to relocate their major headquarters or to have a component of their major headquarters in that state. And that's corporate welfare, because now the government is choosing winners and losers and they're picking sides, and we're against that sort of thing. So we're a nonpartisan organization that advances free market principles that's going to impact today's and tomorrow's generation.
I love that. I had an idea that I shared on the air, and I obviously you weren't on that day, so I'm going to run it by you. But because you're young and you do have kind of a different way of viewing how everything is developing, especially that Amazon thing. I agree with you. It's crony capitalism for them to be demanding all of these breaks, and that these cities woo them by offering them all this stuff that no other corporation is getting. And as much as I'm Amazon Prime to the max. We now have our our staples are coming from them on the automatic delivery thing. So every 2 months we get this one thing. Every other month we get that. It's so cool, and it's so fantastic the way he set the company up. But by the same token, what makes him so much more eligible to get tax breaks. I don't know why he thinks he can do that, but why doesn't he choose a small town in a part of the country where some economic development would be critical, very helpful. And instead of adding on to these already oversized cities that we have in major metropolitan areas, instead put the second HQ in almost what you would call the middle of nowhere. So an airport would need to be built, and infrastructure would need to be built, and 55,000 employees coming in means houses and schools would need to be built, and create another metropolis. Why isn't he doing something like that?
Well, I think that's a good idea. And then also to look at it and say, well, if state government is going to give certain tax breaks and subsidies to these major corporations to relocate there, then those same discounts and those same savings should be given to small businesses throughout the state. One of the big things here in Florida, and I'm still learning about this. I don't know everything there is to be said about it, but there's a thing called Enterprise Florida, and basically it's where the state, they give out all these tax subsidies, and they give it to huge corporations, like maybe like a Lowe's or a Home Depot, Amazon type company, pretty much a large company to move to Florida. And so what that does is that hurts small business owners, the mom and pop stores that are a great avenue of support for local communities. And so that drives them out of business. And so you're losing jobs, which is, of course, a vocal point of our communities. So it is, like you said, it's crony capitalism, it's corporate welfare. We're trying to fight it, and we're trying to bring attention to it by saying, listen, this hurts young people and their quest for work and to be a part of a booming economy, and it's just unfair to give it to major corporations and not to small businesses throughout the states.
I love that. I think it sounds like a great thing for you guys to put on your board for, working towards, because you guys have the infrastructure and the ability interfacing with those local legislatures to do that. And I think every state should consider that, because so how do you get a Walmart or an Amazon even? Well, it starts off as a small business. So we want to see more small businesses with great ideas grow up to the size that Amazon is. But I prefer the tax breaks to the actual incentives that are being offered to Amazon, because some of the stuff they're being offered is outrageous and will decrease the tax base in the areas that they're considering moving to. I mean, it's actually going to be detrimental for certain segments of the economy to receive the Amazon HQ. Everyone acts like it's all gravy, but it's actually not going to be perfection. If your city's chosen, you're giving up a lot to get it. Right.
And it's on the taxpayers are footing the bill, and I believe the taxpayers should have a right to say so, because these governments are making decisions without conferring with their citizens. And just a real quick example of this, I'm a big sports fan. In particular, I'm a huge Atlanta Braves fan. What happened a couple years ago was after the end of the baseball season, the Atlanta Braves announced that they were building a brand new stadium, roughly 30 to 45 minutes away from the current stadium. And I get it. The previous stadium was in a very inconvenient area of town, in terms of crime, transportation, economics, and so I understood it. But what happened was, where they moved, the taxpayers footed the bill there in Cobb County, and they got taxpayer subsidies, and it was just an atrocious deal and crony capitalism at its best. They're trying to do the same thing with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers here in Florida, and it's wrong, and taxpayers should not have to foot the bill for something so outrageous.
I agree. Well, they tried it here in St. Louis, and when we said no, Stan Kroenke uprooted the Rams and moved them to California, which increased the valuation of the team and really worked for him because he was never a St. Louisan and he didn't love it here. But it really upset a lot of season ticket holders and people who'd spent thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars on Rams gear and Rams parties and tailgating, and it was a part of their lifestyle, and they lost the team. And so a lot of people are getting burned by this thing. The people in Cobb County, potentially people in Florida. people here in St. Louis, and I just think these sports teams, all of these different corporations, no matter what their basis is, we got to get them off the government dole. Like, we got to extract them, but that's the toughest thing ever. Okay, so I'll talk to you more offline, but we appreciate you here. Thank you so much, and congratulations on your huge victory in the Florida legislature on behalf of free speech. Demetrius Minor, Coalition's Director for Generation Opportunity Florida.
Hey, always a pleasure, Stacy. Talk soon.
Talk to you soon. Okay, so one segment left, you guys. I barely made it to this microphone today. Y'all don't know. You should have seen us whooping on down the road from one part of Missouri to the other so I could get back here and talk to you this afternoon. So I'm glad to be with you, and we'll be right back with more right after this.
We live in a day when America's families are under attack like never before.
Buddy Smith, Senior Vice President of the American Family Association.
The war against biblical principles rages on numerous fronts. The internet, Hollywood, Washington, D.C., America's corporate boardrooms, and the list goes on. At American Family Association, we're committed to standing against the enemies of God, the enemies of your family. And we recognize it's an impossible task without God's favor and your partnership. Thank you for being faithful to pray for this ministry, to give financially, and to respond to our calls for activism. What you do on the home front is crucial to what we do on the battlefront. We praise God for your faithfulness, and may He give us many victories in the battles ahead as we work together to restore our nation's biblical foundations.
My name is Kayla, and I'm 16. I was already snorting cocaine with my family by the time I was only 8 years old. But when I came to Teen Challenge, everything changed. Now that I'm drug-free, I've started seeing possibilities for myself I never would have dreamed of.
If you know an adult or teenager who's struggling with a chemical addiction, Teen Challenge can help. Call us today at 417-581-2181 or reach us online at teenchallengeusa.com. This is Urban Family Talk.
Pastor Joseph Parker.
You know, obviously when things are going well, it's much easier to have an attitude of thanksgiving and praise to the Lord. But even when things are going difficult, it's important to know too, there's never a time it's inappropriate for us to thank and praise God. Now some may ask, well, what about when you're going through difficult times, when you're walking through the valley of the shadow of death? We can have two different responses. We can worship or we can whine.
Tune in to the Hour of Intercession, weekday afternoons at 1 Central on Urban Family Talk.
The beauty of possibility. Every human life so irreplaceable. I can't imagine life without you. It's just unthinkable. There's no one like you. No one like you. You're 1 in 7 billion.
We are all created by God with undeniable purpose. Learn more about beautiful possibility at www.radiance.life. Follow us on Twitter at Life Has Purpose.
Welcome back to Stacy on the Right.
Evelyn Farkas, it seems to me we learned at the end of the Cold War the degree to which the Cold War rivals in the Eastern Bloc, like Honecker in East Germany, what they really wanted was recognition by the West. They wanted to be able to go to the White House and be received with honors. Could it be that what Kim Jong-un really wants is respect and the prestige that comes with sitting across against the greatest leader in the world, the President of the United States? Could that be the carrot?
Chris, he definitely wants respect. There is no question about that. But I would caution everyone not to get overly enthusiastic. I think we are excited now because, again, in the contrast between this negotiating and fire and fury, military action, which is what we were hearing out of the White House, is scary. And so we're happy that we have engagement. But if you remember what Vice President Pence said coming back from the Olympics, he said we're going to look at engagement and maximum pressure. And I think it's really important to remember, I mentioned earlier, twice before we've been here with the North Koreans where they offered to freeze their nuclear weapons programs, right? And twice before we actually let up on our sanctions and the negotiations fell apart. The North Koreans pocketed what we gave them, the assistance and various other things. Yeah. And they left the negotiating table. So I really believe that while we should absolutely go forward and we should pocket the concessions we can get from them, and we should negotiate in good faith, but we need to keep the pressure on. We can't agree right now that we're going to take the pressure off because otherwise.
But this time we're not putting coal. We're not giving them coal like the last time. We're not giving them stuff like the previous presidents.
We're not taking them off of the state-sponsored terrorism list, right? So I think.
Agree. So what do we got to lose by talking at this point?
Nothing. We absolutely have to talk, and I agree with Joe that we buy time. We buy time, and if what they really will be satisfied with is respect and normalization, great, we can give that to them. But we have to maintain the pressure because remember what got them to the table: the sanctions, and unfortunately, probably some of the bluster coming out of the White House.
Unfortunately, that's like saying unfortunately it stopped raining. What? Yeah, we're glad that the bluster worked. So apparently there was some strategy to it. Shock, shock, shock. Okay, so welcome back to the program. Last segment of the show, 866-963-2037. Call in if you want to join in with what we're discussing here. I also want to remind you guys about our listener stories. Please call in and give us your story, what you'd love to share about how Urban Family Talk is important to you and your family, or what kind of impact Urban Family Talk has had on your life, or how God has used Urban Family Talk in your life. Any of those would be fantastic for us. We'd be so grateful. You can call and share your story on the air. They'll start airing in April during Share-a-thon, so we're really excited about that. It's 877-327-5647. You could share about any one of those things, and we'd be very, very appreciative. So call in 877-327-5647. So we just heard that audio. It's Evelyn Farkas, MSNBC, talking about the different scenarios here with the North Korea meeting, et cetera, et cetera. I got my press release from the White House on the normal thing that we had going on today, the press briefing. And a couple of the questions that were asked had to do with where the president and Kim Jong-un would meet. And she says she's not even discussing that between her and the media because those decisions have yet to be made. And there's also a request from South Korea for a waiver on the steel tariffs. And so one of the reporters asked Sarah Sanders about that. And she said that only 2 countries are excluded and that we can negotiate on matters of national security with other countries. And so that's going to be going on down the line. And I think what ends up happening here, just off the cuff, in my opinion, what ends up happening is that the president gets more favorable conditions for trade for American companies from each of the countries that experiences this tariff. I don't see a situation where we come out at a loss and there's a full-blown trade war, because it's easier to negotiate than it is to just say, you know what, we're not going to give at all. We're not going to give you anything. We're not going to come to the table. We're not going to call you. We're not going to have a conversation. We're just going to hike up tariffs on your goods. No, the more reasonable and what should be expected response is going to be, okay, you've levied a tariff against us. What is it that you're looking for? And then the president put something out and they put back what they're willing to do. And after some give and take, a new deal is reached and no tariffs have to be enacted at all. That's the purpose of this. So I think it's a little bit of Chicken Little sky is falling with everybody saying we're going to have a trade war. I mean, we very well might. Who can actually tell the future? None of us. But I think this is a negotiating tactic, and I do think it's going to have some impact for our favor. And then there were some questions in the press briefing, lots of questions about Kim Jong-un, whether or not he could be trusted. Some questions about things that Lindsey Graham has said, et cetera, et cetera. And then there's also this story out, and this is, to me, this is good news. You guys may remember me covering right here on the program, President Trump pardoning Christian Saucier, a former sailor who was jailed for taking some pictures. He was on the submarine that he worked on as a Navy seaman, and they were at port, and they were getting ready to disembark. And he took some pictures in the submarine, the belly of the submarine, in an area that it turns out is classified. And that's an interesting part of, having a secret security clearance, is that you have access to secret areas on military bases, offices, secret emails, secret communications, secret areas of the submarine ship. And so the classified areas, you're not allowed to take pictures of them, just like you can't forward emails that are classified, et cetera, et cetera. So he takes these photographs on his phone and he texts them to his mom. And he's like, look, Mom, last day on the ship or something like that. And she's like, oh, those are so great. And then I'm not sure, I don't know if I remember exactly how they figured out, but he was actually out of the military when he learned that he was going to be prosecuted for taking those photographs. He'd actually moved on, separated from the service, and was working as a garbage truck driver, which coincidentally, they make really good money. So anyway, he took the pictures and he was sentenced to prison for an entire year. He was released in September, returned to Vermont where he lives with his wife, Sadie, and their 2-year-old daughter. He's 31 years old now, but when he took the pictures, he was 22. He took them back in 2009. He pled guilty to 1 count of unauthorized retention of a national defense information, and his attorneys unsuccessfully requested the Clinton deal, which in their minds, which they described, was little to no punishment. Now, the 6 photos were found on a cell phone. Here's how they found out, that he discarded. They were deemed confidential, the lowest level of classification, even though some of them depicted the vessel's nuclear reactor. So after the felony conviction, after he went out, of prison, and he was working as a garbage guy, he talked about how, their home is in foreclosure, their cars were repossessed. He went back to working as a garbage man, but he has a felony conviction on his record that makes it hard for him to find work for taking 6 photographs. Now, Hillary Clinton deleted 55,000 emails and changed markings on documents, which she then faxed over unsecure methods. And she maintained a bathroom homebrew server. And she has not yet seen any prosecution. So before the pardon, he still had several months left of wearing an ankle monitor as a part of his parole for taking 6 pictures. So President Trump has pardoned him, which means that he's going to be able to go and apply for work without that felony conviction on his record, and he's going to be able to get a better job and start pulling his family out of the financial mess that they're in. I think it's a great thing. And I'm really excited for this young family, because I don't think he should have had to go to prison for this. It just doesn't seem fair. There's a lot of people out there who have these kind of outrageous prison sentences for tiny infractions. And this is not what our justice system was meant for. It's meant to punish evil. These small time little mistakes, it just boggles the mind that it was that they even took time to prosecute it. We could go on and on about that, but I just wanted to give you guys that good news. I thought it was just so wonderful that the president pardoned him, and that now he could have pardoned him before that. It's true, he could have pardoned him before he served the 1-year prison sentence, but apparently he chose not to do that. In other news, 60 Minutes is actually going to interview Stormy Daniels. Yawn, who cares? And Twitter is refusing to comment on anti-Semitic tweets that have been sent out on their medium. Now, you know, Louis Farrakhan is the one who keeps sending out the anti-Semitic tweets and doing the anti-Semitic speeches and taking all the pictures with the Democrats. And so Planned Parenthood has said that they're going to no longer support Democrats who affiliate themselves with Louis Farrakhan. Too little, too late. And also, who cares? Planned Parenthood is Planned Parenthood. And of course, Team Biden is still thinking about whether or not he's going to come to the fore and be the nominee in 2020 for the Democrats, or at least try to be. And the neighbor who attacked Rand Paul in his yard, apparently he's pled guilty. But the last big piece I want to go over for today on our kind of Friday news roundup, which we usually do on Fridays. It's awesome to kind of just gather up all the news and quickly rip through it. So then you don't have to have your phone and be looking at news for the rest of the weekend until Sunday evening. Democrats are considering dropping the superdelegates altogether. This is a measure that goes beyond the proposals from the Clinton-Sanders Unity Commission that centered around changing their superdelegate system. One DNC member said in a memo to party leaders that the whole thing is an absurd and undemocratic idea. Now, remember, the superdelegate process actually works to disenfranchise the regular delegates. The superdelegates are people who are celebrities, people who've worked for the party for a long time, mega donors, friends of mega donors, not regular everyday Joes. So CNN contributors, people like that. Super donors or super delegates. So they're saying that now they perhaps could just eliminate them all of the super delegates. The current system for choosing a Democratic nominee centers around 700 people called super delegates. They're entitled to their own delegate to award to the candidate of their choosing, regardless of votes cast. They make up 30% of the 2,382 delegates needed to clinch the party's nomination. So you have 2,382 delegates. 30% of them, roughly thereabouts, 700, are super delegates. And they get their own delegate to award to the candidate of their choice. So 30% means they can sway the tally enough to go against the regular delegates who are representing the will of the voters in each state. The superdelegates include members of the Democratic National Committee, Democratic elected officials, distinguished party leaders like former presidents and vice presidents. Superdelegates were a major point of contention during the last primary, with Bernie Sanders supporters arguing the system unfairly favored Hillary Clinton. So this is kind of where the rubber meets the road. And this piece is over at BuzzFeed, oddly enough, where they're talking about how the way that this cracks out, the decision that the Democrats make about these superdelegates is going to really decide how Bernie Sanders supporters and some of the people they want the changing of the guard, they want full-on socialism, they want to progress the Democratic Party to a place where, you know, it would then be completely unrecognizable in comparison to its previous iteration. They want to do that so that they can get someone in there who is someone of their own choosing. And they don't want to be bound to what they consider to be archaic rules that harken from a time before when Democrats believed in pro-life and owning guns and free speech and capitalism, back then. All right. So this is the end of the show, but it's not the end of Stacy on the radio for today, because I'll be filling in for the Hamilton Corner, and that comes up at 5 p.m. Central, 6 p.m. Eastern. And that'll be all over the country. He's nationally syndicated through American Family and Urban Family Talk. You can tune into that at 5 o'clock. I'm going to take a little break, and I'm going to say to you, God bless you. Have a fantastic weekend. And Lord willing, I'll be with you on Monday, bright and bushy-tailed. All right. Thanks, guys.
The views and opinions expressed in this broadcast do not necessarily reflect those of Urban Family Talk, Urban Family Communications, or American Family Association.
Urban Family